Okay. All right, we're gonna convene the meeting. Well, good evening, everyone. It's Thursday, 6:30, October 18th, and I'd like to welcome you all to the council meeting for the Village of Royal Palm Beach. Now, at this time, I normally will ask you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, but tonight we have with us Boy Scout Troop 160, and I'd like to give you the honor of standing and leading us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening. Thank you.
Nice job.
Which group were you with?
160.
160.
Okay, Diane, please let the record show that all members of council are present.
Yes, ma'am.
And we'll start out with our reports. I have a couple of items I want to report on. Before I do that, I want to take a moment and commend Lou Recchio and Mike McCullochuk and all of the rest of their team. Boy, they really put a lot of work in and a lot of hours in this past weekend for the Rocktoberfest. Great job, Lou. Thank you very much. You took the words out of my, it was more than hot. It was really, really humid, and that has a double effect on you.
So, your fans next time.
Well, okay, we'll see if it fits in the budget.
Yeah.
No. But anyway, once again, they do a great job. He had his team out there. They were all over the place, and they were covering all the bases. And it's clear to me that as we go through this cycle every year with the events we have for our citizens at the park, at Commons Park, we learn things from the prior event, and we kind of continue. There's a continuous improvement that you can see. So nice job, Lou. Thank you very much, and to your team. Today was the third Thursday of the month, and that's usually when the Transportation Planning Agency for Palm Beach County meets, and we did meet this morning. Just a couple of key items that I want to share that were decisions that were made at today's meeting. As you've heard me talking about, and we voted on our support and participation for the TPA to transition to be an independent agency. Well, today a major step forward was done in that endeavor where the full TPA board approved two resolutions. One was the amount of funds that needed to be expended to do preparation work, construction work on the site that was selected for the TPA for them to have their new office location. And the second was the approval of agreement to enter into a lease agreement. The location would be 301 Decatur Avenue down in West Palm Beach. And this has been moving forward at a very productive rate. And if all things work out, you know how it is when you have construction work that has to be done to a new site. Sometimes it doesn't stay on schedule, but they're hopeful that they can be moving into their new offices as early as May of next year. So that was a major decision that was made today at the TPA meeting. We also had an interesting presentation from Dr. Ken Delaney. She works with the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council. She's an expert in transportation planning. And it was something called a TOD, a Transportation-Oriented Development. Now, this really perks up my ears hearing about the TOD, and the whole purpose of the presentation was some projects that are going on and some corridor studies that are going on within the county. None of these corridors, the corridor study they're looking at is along Lake Worth Road, and it's nothing that's really near to the village of Royal Palm Beach. But the significance for me was that this conversation about expanding our horizon on transportation opportunities and mobility options, I think is ultimately important. And she had a very good presentation today that had a lot of back and forth discussion about different things that could be done to existing corridors to improve the ability for people to make crosses across those roadways for bicycle safety and even more pedestrian safety in terms of expanded sidewalks. But it's a conversation I think that we need to continue to have, and we may be sitting down with Kim sometime in the near future just to throw some ideas at her, because she does know this space very well. With that concludes my comments, and we'll start with you, Selena.
Good evening. I attended the Royal Palm Beach Writers Group that they had, and it's really cool. They have a book published of all their work, so it's really neat just to hear them. So they're all local writers and artists that are out there. So they did stand up. It was a really nice presentation that they did. So they do those so often in the village. The mayor, I was with the mayor at the WGI breakfast, so it was really neat when you were talking about transportation earlier.
Yeah, I forgot about
The topic, yeah. You want to talk about it? Because that's your forte if you want.
No, well, it was great.
It's good.
I loved it. I got on the phone with Ray after and told him, I want to go to this conference now, and
Yeah.
it was all about the topic was the acronym is AV, autonomous vehicles, and the impact it's going to have on us going forward. And I've been touting this, saying that we're not paying enough attention, and it's going to be here before we know it, and we need to get out in front of it. But
Yeah,
I loved it.
It was really
Was
neat.
that this week?
That was, I don't know.
Last
They
week?
all blend together. It was the impact of autonomous vehicles on urban design, parking, and infrastructure was the title of the breakfast, and the theme they had was the Jetsons. So everyone always thinks of the cartoon The Jetsons and how long before you're in that. But they talked about ride-sharing programs and how those are evolving and how they affect communities. They specifically talked about Clematis Street downtown, so they are widening sidewalks so that it is for more walking, pedestrian wide, and also for transportation like Uber and Lyft that they're going to be dropping off so that they don't need all the space for that and parking, that it's more of the open sidewalk. And then they also talked about parking structures and how they're re-evolving. So they were actually currently building the current parking structures that they're building now could be transformed in the future. So if you don't need them for parking because we're driving less and we have less vehicles, how can we transform these parking structures? So they're doing the heights different. We talked about like the ramps aren't going to be there as strong, the electrical outlets, just everything they're thinking about, how they can transform that going forward. And then lastly, we have movie night and gourmet truck expo coming up at Commons Park on October 26th. And then also our Royal Palm Beach Community Band is playing at Crestwood on the 30th. Thank you.
Only report I have is last Friday night I attended the Royal Palm Beach High Homecoming, and they were so close, but unfortunately they lost again in the last minute. But the band did a great performance in the pouring rain, so that was worth it, and that's all.
Okay, very good. Jeff.
Good evening. Thank you. I think Councilman Valente is a little bit biased there about the band, just a tad bit, but it was close. It was almost the first win of the season. So anyway, it's a good thing to hang on to. Speaking of education, the Education Advisory Board met last Monday, this past Monday, I guess. Cypress Trail Elementary School was showcased, and we got a chance to meet the new principal, Bruce Salter, who is a resident of Royal Palm Beach, which makes it extra special. And even beyond that, he taught for a number of years over at Royal Palm Beach Elementary, and in talking with him a little bit, he's actually adopted some of those things that he learned through some of his experiences over there. So I think it's going to be a great addition to our community, to the educational system here. He talked a good bit about the fact that it is one of our 3 A-rated elementary schools, and of course we're really proud of those. They've got, as you would expect, a plan to even get better each year going forward, and one of their primary targets is the 3rd grade reading proficiency, which right now is at about a 61% level. And actually within the county, that is to say the school district, the objective is 75%. They've got a plan to get 3% improvement each year. What's really important is their plan actually has some specific actions that they're taking to really help that whole thing along. So I think we were all very impressed with what he's doing. One of the most important things that he's doing is engaging parents even more substantially than perhaps they have been in the past, and targeting dads. And of course, we've talked a little bit about one of the programs that does that over at the Royal Palm Beach Elementary, and it's called the Watchdog Program, which is Dads of Great Students. And while he hasn't started that yet, he said he would. But he did start with something that is called the All Pro Dads, which is a dinner once a month for dads to get them involved, get them engaged, get them on site, and that kind of thing. So I think he's doing a good job. I think it's going to be, we're going to see even better results than we've seen in the past, even from that elementary school. So he's a great addition to the community. School District Regional Superintendent, Central Area, Dr. Rodriguez, reminded all of us that the upcoming ballot has an important agenda item on it, an important referendum item that has to do with the possibility of raising the ad valorem school taxes by $1 million. And of course, he talked about the purpose, which includes things like school safety, teachers' pay, and things of that nature. So he, of course, has been talking about that just about every meeting, not advocating, but informing.
Not advocating.
Not advocating, but informing. And last Friday, yes, it was last Friday. Time does fly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
South Florida Regional Planning Council and the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council had a joint meeting. Now, they do this usually once a year. This one was down in Fort Lauderdale, and I actually got a chance to find out that if you can use Brightline, it is a great alternative to using I-95. My friends on Brightline took an hour to get back. I took about 2 hours and 15 minutes in the
Really?
traffic getting back from Fort Lauderdale. So
How'd they get from the station to the front door?
it's within walking distance, actually, as it turns out. It's from
Yeah, when you
down
got back
there.
here,
From
though.
here,
Yeah.
they had to drive and park.
Okay, but,
Or Uber. or
okay,
Lyft,
that works.
right?
Uber's
I
good,
mean,
yeah.
We're
okay.
talking first mile, last mile. kind of
First
thing,
mile,
right?
last mile, right.
Exactly. So one of the reasons to get together is, I hadn't thought about it this way, but the two regional planning councils represent a total of 7 counties in Florida. And in those 7 counties, on the southeast corner, we have over 8 million people. And that's more than a third of the total state's population. And when you add that to what we were told was a GDP that is basically 1/3 of the total state GDP generated through the economy in that area, it's a pretty powerful block. So the idea is get these 2 regional planning councils together, put together joint resolutions to try to encourage the state legislature and even at national level action on issues of regional importance. So we had about a half a dozen joint resolutions that were actually put in front of us. They dealt with things like affordable housing, and in particular the Housing Trust Fund. I think we talked about the state has a habit of raiding the trust fund. Another issue was the NFIP, the National Flood Insurance Program, and encouraging reauthorization. So there is money in that program to take care of things like Hurricane Michael, and also to make changes to the way that the contributions from states are actually generated to that program. Florida is basically a donor state. The idea is to try to push in the direction of a little more equitable treatment of Florida. And then we talked also a bit about the increasing population that we're experiencing. I don't know whether you all know it or not, but I've heard 2 different numbers, and both are pretty impressive. One is that every day Florida receives 1,000 new people moving in. Well, at this meeting, they said 1,100. Bottom line is, it's a lot of people. And when you consider our water supply being a consideration, an important consideration here in Florida, that was another issue that was taken up. In fact, there was an estimate that the drinking water requirements will increase by 20% by 2035 as a result of all this growth. So that and septic tanks, big deal, big issues, and they were the subjects of some of these joint resolutions. Now, every one of the joint resolutions was passed unanimously, with the exception of one, which had a couple of no votes on it, but it was a very successful meeting. It was a very informative meeting, so I think it was definitely worth the time, including the 2-hour and 15-minute drive back from
Next time,
Fort
take the
Lauderdale.
train.
I'm taking Brightline next time. I really will. Last thing I want to report on was Central Palm Beach County had their monthly economic luncheon. The topic this month was workforce readiness. They had Mark Wilson, who is the president and CEO of Florida Chamber of Commerce, speak. And the title of his speech was Skills, Talent, and the Future of Work. He brought up a couple of interesting points to make his point, and that was that there are currently 200,000 jobs available, about 200,000 available in Florida. Unfortunately, there are about 400,000 people looking for work. Now, you might say, well, how could that possibly be? Well, his explanation was we have a misalignment between talents that are available and the job requirements.
Gee, really?
Yeah, and so he suggested that rather than individuals pointing fingers at one another, groups like businesses, the education entities, collaborating so that businesses make educational systems aware of what their requirements are today and in the future. It would be a lot more effective down the long run. He said, in fact, it's kind of, he gave an analogy which I thought was kind of clever. He said, you know, it's kind of like going to a restaurant and ordering dinner without looking at the menu and then expecting it's going to work out okay. So I thought that was a good one. The point being, businesses, the educational system in particular, need to collaborate so that they can be in alignment, and that would take care of some of this problem. So that completes my report.
Okay, good. Jan?
Okay, so I had the opportunity to go to the second congressional debate between Brian Mast and Lauren Bear. And it's sponsored by WPTV Channel 12, and they're rebroadcasting it in its entirety on Saturday night at 7 p.m. So for those who want to know more about who's running for our congressional seat,
Okay,
you have that opportunity to watch that. So.
that's good information, good.
No report, Mayor, thank you.
Okay.
Knocking over equipment.
I'll move away.
You're right. I have two housekeeping items that I need to bring to your attention. These were both items that were covered at the last council meeting, and I'm looking for action from you on both of these. These are very minor, just little cleanups. You all approved a special event permit at the last meeting for Our Lady, Queen of the Apostles. They were having an event on Saturdays and Sundays in December, and we sent them the permit after you had approved it, and they said, oh, we needed Fridays too. They were correct. It wasn't their application, but it was in tiny, tiny, tiny little print. I don't know why it was in different font and print, but anyway, so I'm asking if council would be okay adding December 7th and December 14th from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. to their special event permit. And if you're okay with that, if I could have a motion and a second and a vote to modify.
Look for a motion?
I make a motion to approve the request to include both Friday, the 14th and the 17th.
Second.
7th and 14th.
What did I say, the second?
7th and 14th.
7th and 14th.
Thank you.
Second.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that I'm going to call it a Scribner error
Thank you.
that had to be corrected for that particular agenda item was approved 5-0.
Okay, and thank you. The second item we'll call a math error,
A
because
math error?
I am not a
errors of
mathematician,
all
and I don't pretend to be. Right. This was on Lennar's, the approval for their new model homes. In the presentation you saw, there was a condition of approval limiting them for the 2-bedroom home model to 30% of the zero lot line homes. In the presentation and in the approval that you all did, it was to be 9 homes maximum at the 2-bedroom. It's actually 11 homes. I know, and again,
Not 11 and a half?
Wow.
we were going to round down on that one.
We round down?
We're rounding down.
Okay.
Yes, they asked for 12, we said no,
Okay.
but we don't do half homes. So if I could have an approval just to change, the 30% is staying the same, but instead of the 9, it is supposed to be 11.
Motion to approve from
Second.
9 to 11.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that the mathematical miscalculation error was adjusted and approved with 11 homes for the Lennar project.
Yes,
Thank you, and that's all I have.
Okay, good. At this time, if anyone here has a petition they'd like to present to the council, now would be the time to bring that forward. Seeing none, then I'm closing the public offering of petitions. I have one comment card this evening for statements from the public on non-agenda items, and I have no comment cards on consent agenda items. But the one card I do have is Ron Blick-Silver. Is he here? I didn't see him. Ron, are you outside?
He was here.
No, he went home.
He's, okay.
I talked to him right before the
Oh,
meeting.
you did talk to him?
And he said, okay, thank you, I'll go home.
Yeah, the picture I gave you is the picture we got from him. It's his backyard, or I don't know what it is he's showing
Yes,
us
what it
there.
was is our aquatic vegetation contractor, who's not contracted to spray the banks, got a little carried away when he was spraying the emergent vegetation and killed some of the bank, and
All right, so you want to bring it to our
that
attention?
contractor will be responsible for that.
All right, so you were able to address it with him?
Yes.
Thank you, good, good. All right, I have no further comment cards for non-agenda items or for consent agenda items, but anyone here who would like to comment on those items, now would be the time. Seeing none, I'm closing public comment then for non-agenda items and consent agenda items. And with that, Diane, can you give us consent agenda?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Number 1, approval of the minutes of the council regular meeting of October 4th, 2018. 2, approval and authorization to issue the American Legion Post number 367, a grant equal to its regular meeting space rental cost for its monthly meetings at the Recreation Center for the period beginning November 8th, 2018 through September 30th, 2019, in the amount of $440. 3, approval and authorization in accordance with established policy to make a budget amendment for Fund 303 in the fiscal year 2018-2019 budget. Said amendment to transfer a total of $50,000 from undesignated fund balance 0100 to Cultural Center renovations, PR 1725.
Okay. If there are no comments from members on council, I'll look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that the consent agenda was approved 5-0. All right, our regular agenda, agenda item R1 is a public hearing to consider application number 18-99, an application by the Village of Royal Palm Beach in the adoption of resolution number 18-30, confirming council action. The applicant is seeking a modification to a council-imposed condition for a previously approved green market and to allow such use to occur on Wednesday in addition to the currently approved Sundays within Village Park located at 1036 Royal Palm Beach Boulevard. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, so I'll let you swear in.
Thank you. I'll swear staff in at this time. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll ask council if anyone has any ex parte disclosures that they need to make.
Well, I did talk to the village manager, and I said, this is simply them adding an additional day, right? So it must be doing well.
Yes, and they've already been operating on Wednesdays through a special event permit. They wanted to
So
see
now they want
how,
to make it kind of permanent.
they want to make it permanent,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I summed it
I didn't
up.
know if you guys wanted a
I took
presentation.
your,
They're just essentially adding Wednesday from 3 to 7 p.m. On Wednesdays from, October through April. And staff is recommending approval. Turn the floor back over to you, Mayor.
okay. I do not have any public comment cards on agenda item R1, but if anyone here would like to comment on that agenda item, now would be the time. Seeing none, I'm closing public comment on agenda R1. Open up for comments from council. No comments from council, I'll look for a motion.
Move to approve regular agenda item number 1.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that agenda item R1 was approved 5-0. Okay. Agenda item R2 is a public hearing for first reading and approval of ordinance number 982, amending Chapter 5, Animals, at Section 5-45, Retail Sale of Dogs and/or Cats, in order to eliminate the phase-out period for the retail sale of dogs and cats or cats at an existing pet stores or pet supply stores within the village. So I guess we got the legal definitive.
I did confirm. I drove by the old location, which had been completely gutted on the interior. Actually, the day I was there, all of the interior was in the garbage dump, so I was able to verify that way. And then I also drove to their new location. They are definitely in West Palm Beach, east of the Turnpike. So we have confirmation that they're out
Okay.
of the village.
And I guess it was to justice was a very straightforward item for you.
It was. Luckily, as you can, if you look through the ordinance, we just struck out the phase-out
Okay.
period. So I can read the ordinance title if you would like.
Please do.
Okay. We do have to take public comment, but
I'll take public comment after you.
Okay, thank you. This is ordinance number 982, an ordinance of the Village Council of the Village of Royal Palm Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 5 Animals at Article 2 Dogs and Cats, Division 1 generally, at Section 5-45 Retail Sale of Dogs and or Cats in order to eliminate the amortization period for the retail sale of dogs and or cats at lawfully existing pet stores and pet supply stores within the village, providing that each and every other section and subsection of Chapter 5 Animals shall remain in full force and effect as previously adopted, providing a conflicts clause, a severability clause, and authority to codify, providing an effective date and for other purposes. Thank you.
Okay, I do not have any comment cards on agenda item R2, but if anyone would like to comment, now would be the time. Please come forward. Seeing none, I'm closing public comment on agenda item R2. If there are any comments from members on council? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I make a motion to approve regular agenda item number 2.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There's no opposed. Diane, please let the record show that agenda item R2 was approved 5-0. And I guess all of the folks that were here presenting before, I don't know if you've heard from them, but I guess they're
They were
happy about that?
notified.
Okay.
There's some of them. There's one of them here.
You didn't want to come up and say anything? Okay. Okay. All right, good. All right, agenda item R3 is a workshop, all right? And it's a workshop on ordinance number 945 regarding amendments to Chapter 15, Landscaping and Vegetation Management. So I guess we're going to receive, one or two presentations? One presentation?
One presentation, 3 people.
Right.
Oh, I got it. I knew it was multiple. All right. And the purpose of the presentation is, once we hear it, is to have open discussion on the council on your thoughts and whatever input, and we'll continue to progress the process. We will not make any decisions tonight. We have no need, we won't be taking a vote on anything, but this is a workshop. So. Now, I just want to share with council, I will permit public comment once we've had the presentation done and see if there's anyone from the public before we actually engage, because that's what we do in Royal Palm. Right? Go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. This is a presentation to introduce council to propose updates and amendments to the village's landscape code. Jennifer and Rob and I will be presenting different topics on this effort. What I'd like to do first, in the first part of this presentation, is to give an overview of why we are proposing to amend the landscape code, and also will be touching upon some of the benefits of tree preservation. Jennifer will walk you through the nuts and bolts of the code revision, and Rob will discuss his plans for educating the public. Why are we revising the code to focus on tree preservation? Well, an update is needed to address changing conditions. The landscape code has not been comprehensively reviewed and updated since 2001. There have been a lot of changes in the village since 2001. The village is almost built out. Therefore, there has been a shift in focus from developing new areas to protecting and preserving ones that we currently have. Neighborhoods and shopping centers are getting older. Trend in older areas is to remove trees and landscaping and not replace them. This results in loss of aesthetic value and property values over time. We also hear from many of the residents of the village that the lush parks, landscaped boulevards, and general natural feel in the village was a strong attraction for them when they decided where to purchase a home, and we feel that the time is right to amend the code to promote the preservation of the village's landscaping. An update is also needed to stay consistent with the Tree City USA standards. Some of those standards are here represented on this slide. The village first received Tree City USA designation in 1990. We still hold the title today, 28 years and counting. In 1990, a letter from the National Arbor Day Foundation told the village that the Tree City USA award indicates that you take your municipal tree care responsibility seriously. And per the National Arbor Day Foundation, becoming Tree City USA is a way to make your community stand out and shows you're dedicated to the management of your urban forest and strive to provide a beautiful landscape to the residents we all serve. Now, what value do trees add to a community? The urban forest concept Let's get on the right side. Urban forest includes all trees within a community. Trees provide many benefits, including shade, which lowers summer temperatures in cities, reduce storm runoff, minimizes flooding, and protection from high winds. When cities manage trees properly, there is a proven benefit to the community. These benefits have been studied thoroughly and analyzed by experts, as those at the IFAS, extension of the University of Florida, and the USDA Forest Service. Urban forests can reduce annual stormwater runoff by 2 to 7%, and mature trees can store up to 5,100 gallons of water during large storms. Trees can also clean air by absorbing pollutants, shade cars, and parking lots. Studies have shown visual exposure to settings with trees helps recover from stress and reduce noise pollution. Studies have also shown trees to improve driving safety, and one study found a 46% decrease in crash rates across urban arterial and highway sites after landscape improvements were installed. Trees shade has also been proven to reduce pavement fatigue and other distress. Studies have shown that there is a direct benefit to shopping centers. Street trees prolong the life. Let's see here. Shoppers will travel further and longer to visit a district with highly quality trees and spend more time there once they arrive. People have more favorable perceptions of communities with green roads. Visitors to well-treated central business districts will spend 9 to 12% more for products. A study found that 7% higher rental rates for commercial offices having high-quality landscapes. Studies have found general increase of up to 37% in residential property values associated with the presence of trees and vegetation on property. Here's some of the reference material that we've provided if you wanted to, any additional reading on the weekends. This slide is an illustration showing a visual comparison of a home with no tree canopy in the front yard and one that has included palm clusters in the front yard. As you can see, the difference is evident. Again, here's some pictures of some of the shopping centers. You can see on the top one, the shopping center has completely hat-racked their gumbo limbo trees within the landscape buffer along State Road 7. And the second picture is a illustration of what a perimeter buffer, how it can contribute to aesthetic value of a shopping center. To understand where we are going, we need to review where we are now. What vegetation do we currently protect? And the answer is different depending on whether we are dealing with a site planned or a non-site planned property. With site plan properties, the site plan shows the number, size, and species of trees and plants that must be installed and maintained within the development. All plants and trees shown on a site plan are considered required vegetation. Extra trees and vegetation planted are not considered required, but are just considered extra. When required vegetation is removed, it must be replaced in the same quantity, species, and minimum size because the site plan requires it. If you have extra vegetation on your property, you are not required to replace it upon removal. What types of vegetation do we currently protect? On non-site planned properties, each property has a minimum number of trees and shrubs that are required per village code. This is a required vegetation for a site. This minimum number will be different depending on whether your property received development approval or building permit before or after November 15th, 2001. This was the date of the last major village update to our code. Properties developed prior to November 15th, 2001 are deemed vested or grandfathered under the old minimum number of requirements. Properties developed after November 15, 2001 must comply with current minimum number of standards. If you remove a tree or shrub from property and that removal brings you below the minimum number required by code, you have to replace it. If you have extra vegetation on your property, you are not required to replace it upon removal. Problems with the current approach. Currently, this code is not a preservation code. Current approach, it's a status quo approach based on minimum standards. Current code only says don't drop the number of trees and shrubs on your property below the minimum number required and at the minimum size required. It does not provide guidance on tree preservation techniques in order to keep trees healthy and alive. It does not prevent a property owner from removing trees that are healthy and pose no safety hazards so long as the owner gets a vegetation removal permit from the village. Village staff cannot deny the permit or impose conditions so long as the owner replaces as necessary to maintain the minimum number required by our code. It does not prevent clear cutting of land so long as a vegetation removal permit is obtained. It does not require property owner to replace the canopy removed. Owners only are required to replace trees at a 1-to-1 ratio and a minimum size and spread outlined in the code. It does not treat specimen trees differently than newly planted trees, and the result is significant loss of tree canopy over time. That is the end of my portion of the presentation, and I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
All right, thank you, Bradford. Thank you. Yeah, I don't want to be drinking out of your water. No. I would too. I wouldn't even think. I'd just grab it. All right. So Bradford covered for you kind of why we're presenting this to you all. As you know, for the past 2 years, this has been on council's strategic plan to address this issue. And it came about for a number of reasons. You know, our older residential areas, and also council has been very concerned with vacancy rates at old commercial areas. And staff got together and we took a look at what measures we could take to improve both of those issues, and landscaping was at the top of the list. So that is one of the main reasons that we've been pushing this and trying to bring this forward to you. So a quick summary of the proposed code changes for tonight. We're going to talk about tree trimming and pruning standards, vegetation removal permits, a tree replacement schedule. What do we have now versus what do we want to propose? Specimen trees, remedies for violations, net lot area. That's how we calculate your minimum number on your lot. Housekeeping revisions, and then we're going to talk about the proposed ordinance effective date, and Rob Hill then will talk to you about the public outreach effort that we're going to be undertaking to make sure all residents, businesses, and HOAs understand what we're going to be expecting going forward. So let's start with tree trimming and pruning standards. What does our code currently say about those things? Well, it doesn't say a whole lot. It basically says that landscaping shall be maintained in a healthy growing condition, shall be pruned on a regular basis so as to provide a neat, trim, and well-kept appearance. Not a lot of guidance. It says failure to protect vegetation during other vegetation removal constitutes tree abuse. Okay, well, what do we mean by protecting other vegetation? And then it says general maintenance and pruning of trees shall not include the practice of hat racking. We do have a specific definition for hat racking in the code. It's stubbing off branches more than 3 inches in diameter. I have provided you 2 photos here on the right side of the screen to give you some visuals of what hat racking actually is. It's when you are stubbing off the branches. It destroys tree canopy. It destroys the longevity of a tree. So it's called a hat rack because the tree at the end of it actually looks like something, a coat rack or a hat rack. So the issues with the current code on tree trimming and maintenance standards is it does not give clear guidance to residents about what do they need to do pruning-wise to keep the tree healthy and alive long-term. What we've ended up having to do is we are citing people for hat racking and we're citing people for when the tree actually dies. But there's a lot of steps in between planting a tree and the death of a tree where, pruning and maintenance are very important to prolong the life of the tree. So again, we would like to add into the code some objective standards, some objective pruning standards approved by arborists to give clear guidance on how trees should actually be maintained. On the issue of hat racking, so let's talk about what the new proposed code amendments are. We're keeping the technical definition of hat racking the same. We are allowing 2 exceptions to the prohibition on hat racking. One, if it's done under the guidance of an arborist or a landscape architect, it's okay. We're not going to cite someone and hold them in violation. A really good example of this just happened about a year ago down on State Road 7 at Olympia in Wellington. After Hurricane Irma, they had ficus trees that ran all along State Road 7 and all along Forest Hill Boulevard and basically formed a barrier around that entire neighborhood. After Irma, a majority of those ficus trees were heavily damaged from the storm. They had an arborist or landscape architect, I'm not sure, come in after that, and they methodically went through and pruned those trees. And a lot of the pruning did look like hat racking, but it was done under the care of an arborist in an effort to regenerate growth on those trees so that they didn't have to remove them. So that was the thought process here behind that exception, that if an arborist or a landscape architect says this is a necessary way to try to restore the health of the tree, that's fine for us. Another exception that we've added in is we're not going to enforce hat racking or tree abuse violations on prohibited vegetation, invasive species. It's prohibited. We don't want it. Hat rack away. So that's kind of the thought on that. So for the specifics on pruning and trimming standards, again, our code is just keep it in a neat, healthy appearance, which again doesn't give a lot of guidance. So we've added in here that we would like to follow what they call the ANSI A300 standards. Those are arborist standards. And when Rob and his team, they go and they develop their materials for public education, we will have references and resources available to members of the public who want to understand what those standards are in more detail. On the issue of tree abuse, we now are giving very specific examples of what constitutes tree abuse. And again, these are based on arborist standards. Just like with hat racking, we have the same two exceptions to the tree abuse rule. We don't care if it's prohibited. You can abuse the trees all you want. And also, if the tree abuse occurs under the direction of an arborist or landscape architect, again, we're okay with that because those are professionals and they know what they're doing. Some examples here for you all of, this is not an exhaustive list on this screen, but this is going to give you some of the things that are in the code about tree abuse. What we tried to do is we tried to find examples that were commonly used in other codes in the state of Florida and ones that could be easily understood. I will tell you, I surveyed numerous codes, and there are codes in Florida that are extensive, like 150 examples of tree abuse. And a lot of them, I had to Google to even figure out what they meant, and that was not something that we wanted to do with your code. With your code, we wanted to make it easily understandable so somebody looking at it could go, okay, I understand that. So some examples we've put in here: don't damage your tree with machinery or chemicals. Don't cut your tree to cause it to go into shock. Bark removal by more than 1/3 of the tree diameter. There's another term for that called girdling, where you cut bark around the entire circumference of the tree. That is very bad for the tree, and I've shown a photo of that to the right. Bark removal by more, I read that one already, sorry. Excessive root cutting, removing more than 25% of the tree canopy. Failure to treat disease, infection, or pest infestation. We have encountered that frequently in the village, at least on the planning and zoning department level. And we have one standard with respect to palm trees. And a lot of times you'll see palm trees where they're hurricane cut, which is the photo here to the right. We call it carrot topping or hurricane cutting the palms. It's actually very bad for the palm trees. As palm fronds die, the existing living palm tree takes the nutrients from the dying fronds and actually uses those nutrients to generate new fronds. So when you go and prematurely cut a frond, you're actually harming the tree. Another issue with hurricane cutting is as you're getting closer to the top of the tree, you're getting close to the heart of the palm. And there's a chance that as you're cutting closer and closer to that heart, you could damage the heart of the palm and then actually kill the palm. So hurricane cutting is not good for trees. What we did do instead is we set up a standard where you're going to measure the horizontal plane from the trunk of the tree. So think of a 90-degree angle. The north-south portion is the trunk of the tree, and then the east-west portion of that angle is the horizontal plane. If a palm frond dips, the tip of it dips below the horizontal plane, you can cut it. It's fair game. But if that palm frond the tip of it is above the horizontal plane, that's not one that you should be cutting because, again, you're getting up there into that hurricane cut, which is not healthy. And we will have diagrams for residents because that's very hard to explain.
We're going to have pictures from it.
Yeah.
We will, yes, we will. Okay, so moving on to the next topic, vegetation removal permits. So what do we currently say about vegetation removal permits in the code? Right now, you cannot remove any vegetation on your property without a vegetation removal permit. If the vegetation that you remove is required, then it has to be replaced, and it's replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio. We do allow some exceptions to the vegetation removal permit requirement. For example, if there's a health safety hazard, like the trees posing a danger of falling on a house, you can go ahead and remove that without getting a permit. You know, your life and your property are a priority. And then the one thing in our code that is a little strange, which we are asking to fix, is prohibited exotic vegetation. You have to get a permit to remove it. So we'll talk about how we're going to be addressing all those issues. Some issues with the current code, we don't have a lot of guidance in the code from a staff perspective on what do we look for when we're granting or denying a vegetation removal permit? What do we look for when we're trying to condition something? Maybe it doesn't make sense to remove all the trees in an area because of erosion or buffering or for whatever reason. We don't have any standards. Right now, if somebody applies for a permit, we have to grant it. There's no ability for staff to condition or even deny it in some cases. Also on the exemption.
What's the point?
That's why we're going to try to.
Oh, okay.
We're going to try to address that. Yeah. Okay. For exemptions to the permit requirement, I mentioned the health safety issue, like say a lightning hits your tree and it's in danger of falling. We've had instances where individuals have used that as an excuse to get out of a code enforcement case when we find out later that maybe the facts as represented weren't accurate. So we, as staff, would like to have a little more documentation as to what the health safety issue was before we say that they're exempted from the permit requirement. And then for prohibited vegetation, from a staff perspective, we want that vegetation removed quickly. We don't want it sitting around, and sometimes vegetation removal permits take weeks or months to get obtained. So the thought process is, how can we help residents speed up eradicating invasive species? So some of the proposed amendments that we have coming forward to you all, we are giving staff significant guidelines in the code about how to evaluate vegetation removal permits, how to condition them, and in some instances, especially when we're dealing with specimen trees, how to deny them. Like I said before, an example of this is like with buffering between maybe a commercial zone and a residential zone. Say a commercial zone, a commercial pod is coming in to be developed, and they want to clear cut the land. And staff evaluates it and said, but why are you eliminating all of these well-mature oak trees right along the boundary of the residential property? We would much rather have 20-year-old oak trees there than little tiny saplings that you're going to plant for the existing neighborhood. So this is going to give staff a lot more ability to say, preserve certain parts. You can build over here, but preserve this because of a buffer issue or a preservation issue. We're also going to allow the exemptions to the permit requirement for health safety hazards, but again, we want some documentation from the property owner that health safety issue actually did exist, because once the tree's removed, we're not going to be able to tell you that. And then finally, we're going to allow exotic vegetation to be removed without a permit, except for land clearing. Land clearing, like clear cutting, they are still going to have to get a permit because we have to be able to validate that everything being removed is actually exotics. Okay, I'm going on to the next topic, tree replacement schedule. So what our code currently says about tree replacements, say a required tree is taken out, what happens? Well, it has to be replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio. So one tree goes out, one tree comes back in. There's no consideration for how old the tree was, how big the tree was that's coming out. It's just one's going back in at the minimum requirements, which are 14 feet in height, a trunk caliper of a minimum of 2.5 inches. That's measured about 4.5 feet off the ground. You measure the diameter of the trunk, and a minimum canopy spread of 5 feet. So as Bradford mentioned earlier, the 1-to-1 ratio can be a little problematic because you are not really replacing the tree canopy that's being lost. You're replacing possibly a very large mature tree with a little tiny tree. So our new tree replacement schedule that we have in the code, this is based off of numerous other codes in the state. It eliminates the 1-to-1 ratio. Instead, it's basing it on trunk width, because the older the tree, the larger the trunk. And the older the tree, the more trees are going to be required to replace it. And like I said before, this tree replacement schedule was derived from other jurisdictions in Florida. So this is the tree replacement schedule that we're proposing in the code. Just to give you a few examples here, say the diameter of the tree where we measure it, that 4.5 feet off the ground, is 2 to 8 inches in diameter. One tree is going to be required to replace it. 9 to 16 inches diameter, two trees to replace it. 17 to 24, 3 trees, and so on. When we get the real big trees at 41 inches or more in diameter, we're capping it out at 6 trees. Now, there could be a situation where somebody has a very large mature oak tree on their property. Say it's a residential property, it's one of the smaller lots. That tree dies just due to age. Homeowner didn't do anything wrong, it just dies. And it's a required tree. They have to have a shade tree. So they go into planning and zoning, they say, I gotta take this tree out, it's dead, I'm worried it's gonna fall on my house. And planning and zoning says, okay, well, under our new tree replacement schedule, you have to replace this with 6 trees. Well, my lot's only 7,000 square feet. Where am I going to fit the 6 trees? The code right now doesn't address it, but the new code revisions talk about some options for the property owner. One of them is if there is size limitations, they can either donate trees to the village to make up for that canopy loss, so if they can't fit it on their property. Or also, the other option is that they can donate money to the village's tree bank instead of buying trees. And there's a tree bank formula, like how you calculate a value of a tree. It's in the code and it's set. So those are the 2 options for the homeowner. We'll talk a little bit about net lot area in a bit, which should lessen that burden on a residential homeowner. But those are 2 options for the owner if they can't fit the replacement trees on site. One thing I do want to talk to you about, the tree bank. We have talked a lot about the deforestation of some of our residential neighborhoods. And there are programs in the state of Florida where cities have gone and tried to add trees back into those neighborhoods that have lost tree canopy. They're called neighborhood reforestation plans. The tree bank is setting that up for us. It is allowing us to have a source of money that the village can contribute to, residents can contribute to, businesses can donate to. And it will set it up where we can fund some of these neighborhood reforestation programs. So staff is going to be exploring that concept in the next year or so, and we'll start visiting that with you all. But this code is a way to set up that concept. Okay, moving on to specimen trees. Specimen trees are a type of tree that are highly valuable to a community based on their species, their size, and their age. So right now under our code, we offer no additional protections for specimen trees. If something that would be considered a specimen tree, maybe a 30-year-old oak tree, dies and needs to be replaced, it's replaced on a 1-to-1 ratio. We give no extra protection for specimen trees. So right now, if a specimen tree is not required vegetation, the property meets the minimum requirements without the specimen tree, and the owner wants to take it out, they can take it out and they don't have to replace it. If it's required vegetation and they want to take it out, they replace it back with 1 tree at our minimum requirements. So we have no additional protections for specimens. What this ends up doing is we are not able to replace the canopy that's actually being lost, and we're losing these highly valuable trees. We've had examples of HOAs in the past who have a lot of trees in their common areas. They're not shown on a landscape plan anywhere, so they're extra vegetation. And they come in and they're like, we're tired of maintaining these. They're perfectly healthy, but we just don't want them. And they'll go and they'll cut them down, and we have not been able to require any replacements. So entire canopies have been lost that way. And similar events have occurred at shopping centers and on some single-family lots as well. I want to show you an example from 2013. This was one of the triggering events for staff in starting to take a look at our landscaping code, because the end result of this case was not great. We have Village Shops here where they had a tree service or a landscaper, we're not quite sure, come in and hat rack and tear down pretty much every tree in their parking lot. And they replaced it at 1-to-1 ratio, minimum requirement. So we were not able to penalize them for doing that. And the explanation was, it was tearing up their parking lot and their parking areas, and couldn't see their signage. And again, with proper preservation techniques, we should have never gotten there. And the result was we lost over 20-year-old mahogany trees. I think they were mahoganies. Okay, so the new code, it adds a definition for specimen trees, and it actually designates certain species of trees that can become specimens. Now, not all trees will be specimen trees. At the end of the day, it is council's call on which trees we're going to designate as specimens. We have provided you a list in here that we've taken from other lists in Florida, and we've tried to compare it to the trees we see on landscape plans and in existing areas. But at the end of the day, we are going to be asking for council's direction on first reading about this list of specimen trees. Is this the list that you want? I have on the screen here some examples. We've got bald cypress, gumbo limbos, live oaks, royal palms, royal poincianas. And then we give here the size of the trunk diameter at the point in which those tree species become specimens. So again, you don't have to make this call tonight, but take a look at the tree names. I gave Ray some photos of each of the tree species, and we can talk more about if you want all of those to become possible specimens. The ramification of that is whatever you do designate as specimens, if you have it on a residential lot and that resident wants to take it down, they will be faced with replacing it with more than one. So there is that cost issue for residential lots. So again, that's why we want to make sure that council is okay with the list we're proposing.
Just so I understand what you just said, specimen trees there won't be any requirement to replace them.
No, there will be now.
List.
They will be, yes. If it's on the list and they reach specimen status, regardless of whether they're required or not, you will be replacing them at more than a 1-to-1 ratio
To achieve the canopy
to
equivalent?
achieve the canopy that's being lost. Yeah, so that's why it could be expensive.
Specimens.
Specimens are the desirable trees.
Correct. And they're desirable. If you look through the list, there are reasons we picked the ones we did. We were looking at wind mitigation, wind protection from storms, your oaks, your maples, the large shade trees that protect your home from wind. We were looking at soil erosion, your cypress trees. Those are great at maintaining soil. They can survive in wet or dry conditions. And then we have flowering trees, which are aesthetically pretty. So there's kind of a combination in that list. It's really council's direction on how many you want to designate, and so we'll revisit that on first reading. But we do add in new requirements in vegetation removal permits for specimen trees now. So staff will have the ability to deny vegetation removal permits on specimen trees. We don't have that ability right now. They will be able to do that. So if the tree is perfectly healthy and not posing a safety hazard, and that may be a situation where village staff says, no, you're not going to remove that. It's too valuable. Okay. And this is what the mayor had just asked me about. Once it becomes a specimen tree, it will be replaced according to the tree replacement schedule, regardless of whether it is required. So it's one of those, once it reaches specimen status, it has to be replaced. Okay, one of the other things that we're adding in here right now on clear cutting of land, like I said before, we have no restrictions on clear cutting unless there's already an existing conservation easement, which we've dealt with before. So we feel that if we're going to be protecting specimen trees, we need to have some requirements for clear cutting so that we don't lose specimen trees during clear cutting processes. We've set up a table where a certain number of specimen trees have to be preserved, even if you're clear cutting a site. So here is the table. So it kind of goes through, if you have one specimen tree per acre, you have to save all of them. And then it goes up to, if you have more than 8 per acre, save up to 50 with a maximum of 6 trees per acre. The code does allow too for planning and zoning department to have a little flexibility there and let a developer, say a site has a ton of specimens, planning and zoning will work with them to put them in logical areas, like group them together in a conservation area or around a lake or on a buffer, and they can spread out the requirement throughout the entire development. All right, remedies for violations of current code. In code enforcement, hat racking is sometimes a difficult, and tree abuse can be a difficult thing to take in front of a magistrate. What is a fair remedy when that happens? Do you just fine the person? Do you fine them and make them take out the tree and replace the tree? You know, there's a lot of factors that go into that decision, and it a lot of times depends on the facts of the case, what you actually ask the magistrate to do. A lot of cities that I have seen and that I've actually worked in have very specific remedies in their code about what happens in these situations so that everyone's treated the same. It's a consistently applied remedy. And so that's what we're trying to do in the code now, is give and outline a specific remedy in the event there's a hat rack tree or a tree abuse situation. And we're hoping that this gives the magistrate a little bit more flexibility too in doing what we call rehabilitation plans on a tree. So the magistrate right now, if there's a hat racking situation, he can impose a fine. We're calling it an irreparable, irreversible fine because the hat rack limb can't be replaced. It's gone, it cannot come back. So the fine can be up to $5,000 per violation. That's in the magistrate's discretion. Obviously, the fine amount will be dependent on the severity of the situation. The next question the magistrate's going to address is, can the tree be rehabilitated? Can the rest of the tree, the part that was not hat rack, can it be saved? And we do not have this spelled out in the code right now. We think that this is important because if the tree can be saved, great. That's what we would want. We want the tree to be saved. So we've added that as a specific possibility for the magistrate to consider. If it can't be saved and it needs to be removed and replaced, the code goes through those remedies. And the other thing that we've added in, we want to give violators an opportunity to bring in an arborist or a landscape architect and explain like a rehabilitation plan to the magistrate. Give the violator an opportunity to try to save the tree. So again, we're just trying to spell out a remedy in the code that we don't currently have spelled out. One of the other things that we did in the code is we tried to, Chapter 15 back in 2001 was combined from 2 different landscaping codes, and the sections were all over the place. So we tried to put all of the violations and penalties in one section because it was spanning over like 5 different sections. So we did try to combine all of that. Okay. Net lot area. This is one thing that staff talked a lot about. Because we are imposing new tree replacement schedules on people, we don't want it to become overburdensome. We don't want it to become outrageous. So the way our code currently calculates the number of trees and shrubs you're required to have on your lot is by total lot area. We do not take into account the structures that you have on your property, like your driveway, your house, any pool that you may have. We don't look at that. We just look at the total square footage of your lot. Why is that maybe unfair? Well, we're counting space for your tree requirement in an area you can't actually plant a tree. So the thought process was, let's make this more fair and let's do net lot area. Let's subtract out all your structures. And then the area that's left, your actual green space where you can really plant a tree, that's what we're going to calculate to figure out your tree requirement. So you'll see in the new code, the new requirement is you have to have 1 tree and 10 shrubs per 2,000 square feet of net lot area instead of just lot area. And again, we think that this is a much more fair standard. Bradford put this table together just to kind of show you a visual of what net lot area looks like and how it's actually going to be helping residents. For example, Hibiscus Drive, which is in the Colony. These are actual houses he found. Under a current code requirement, they would have to have 4 trees in their yard. With net lot area, they're only required to have 3. Cypress Trace, which is in Cypress Head. currently 5 trees required. Under net lot area, only 4 trees required. Carmen Lane, which is in Counterpoint, current code, they have to have 4 trees. Net lot area, they only have to have 2. And then Cordoba Circle, which is in La Mancha, currently required to have 7. Net lot area, they'd only have to have 4. So the thought is we are going to reduce the number of trees you have to have on your lot, but the ones that you do have, you need to take care of them. So it's trying to do a comprehensive approach here. Some housekeeping revisions that we're making to the code, vesting and grandfathering. As you heard Bradford talk about at the very beginning of the presentation, our last major code rewrite was in 2001. The code at the time, the way it was written, it said anyone who was built or had a permit before November 15, 2001, you're exempt from the code. What it meant to say, because 2 sections were combined, what it meant to say is you're exempt from the minimum number and the minimum design standards. You're not exempt from minimum property maintenance standards, like cutting your grass. So we need to clean that up, and we're proposing to clean that up and make that clear that the exemption only applies to the number and the design standards, not about cutting your grass or maintaining your hedges or cutting your trees. So it's just one of those things we need to clean up. One of the other things that we found is if you have a non-conforming site, like say you were built before 2001, and you remove trees, you still have a minimum number, even if you were before 2001 and you remove that tree, what's been happening is people just aren't replacing them. Well, you still have to replace them to get you back to your minimum number. So we wanted that clearly stated in the code. We've had some issues with that. And also, if you are going to be replacing on a non-conforming lot, you need to replace it with a conforming size. You don't, just because you're non-conforming doesn't mean you get to replace with substandard material. You need to put back in a tree that's at 14 feet, 5-foot spread. The thought is we want to make you more conforming over time, the best that we can. One of the other housekeeping items that we have added is putting in specific requirements for trees located within the right-of-way. Right now, our current code, we just have one tiny section that says clearance in sidewalks and right-of-way 7 feet. Okay, well, I'm 6 feet, so that's not a lot of clearance, and we haven't really abided by that standard for a long time. Most of our standards are contained in our right-of-way utilization permits through the engineering department. We thought this was an appropriate time to put all those permit standards in the code. So you'll see a whole new section now on all these permit standards actually being incorporated into the code. And I won't go through all of these, but just a few things to note that hat racking and tree abuse may occur for trees planted within the right-of-way because the priority is the right-of-way. So if you see all the oak trees along Royal Palm Beach Boulevard, they're hat-racked to pieces a lot, but that's because we're protecting the right-of-way. Cars traveling on that roadway have priority over the trees. Okay. Landscape waivers, you all about, I think a year ago, saw a revision to Chapter 2 where you gave Planning and Zoning Commission the right to review and make recommendations to you on landscape waivers. We're adding that same requirement here in Chapter 15 just to make the codes consistent. We're clarifying department duties. The code, when it was written in 2001, you had one planning, zoning, and building department. Now you have 2 separate departments, so you'll see a lot of changes just clarifying what department head is in charge of what. And then finally, we are sort of clarifying the hedge according to this definition of hedge according to this slide, but then in the past few days, staff has had some discussion and we're walking back one thing that we wanted to do. We thought that the definition of hedge needed a little more clarity because you have certain species of plants that can be maintained either as a shrub or a tree, like a ficus. And we thought we wanted to make it clear what we're talking about when we're talking about a hedge, so we don't get into issues with residents. The one thing that we are struggling with is areca palms. So areca palms can be a hedge, but our hedge height requirements are 8 feet. There is no way you can maintain an areca at 8 feet. So when you see this ordinance on first reading, we are going to add the word shrub back in to pull out arecas because there's just no way to handle this. We're just going to allow the existing areca hedges to stay where they are at whatever height those things grow to. But so you'll see that it is a little different from what the slide shows. Finally, before I turn it over to Rob, the ordinance is going to take effect if it is approved by council on second reading in December. However, there is a savings clause at the end of the ordinance that says the village is not going to enforce the new tree trimming, pruning standards, hat racking, or tree abuse for 6 months until June of 2019 to give the village an opportunity to do public outreach and public education so that residents and businesses and HOAs all know what the new requirements are going to be. We felt that 6 months was a fair, reasonable amount of time to give people notice before we started enforcing this stuff. And now I'll turn it over to Rob to talk about their outreach effort.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. Mayor, Council. As you heard, the 6-month timeline is certainly going to be utilized in an efficient way. The first thing we're going to do, you've heard all of those kind of issues with the code, we're going to get some help. We're going to go online. We've got money in our budget already to hire a consultant to provide us services of an arborist or a landscape architect to even help us draft some of these educational materials and some of the actual forms that are going to generate this policy as well as this outreach. Mr. Mayor, we're looking at you to be able to kind of piggyback on your vector at times. Mr. Manager, we'd like to piggyback on your pulse at times and try to get people to, you know, I think we all, without argument, would understand the appreciation and the value of trees. Our mission is to protect property values and people's quality of life. So we've got 6 months to get people to accept that kind of buy-in. It sounds like an awful lot. A lot of it is just a lot of tweaking, and there is some things that are going to be kind of difficult to implement. We are going to make ourselves available to the HOAs. We like to meet with their property managers. I don't think we want to turn this into a question-answer kind of debate with those people, but I'd like to meet with those professionals and then meet with them again if they need be, and then help develop the materials so that they're clear on those standards that are coming down the line. We would like to utilize the marquee signs out front, and we would also like to generate, some FAQs for our new website design, and that we can have that there so that we make ourselves available and through those mechanisms to be able to answer any questions. We're going to be developing these materials so that our code enforcement officers, who will also be getting trained up on a lot of these species and landscaping, will have those things available as they meet with our residents, our direct point of contact. It is, while it's well-defined, I think we all acknowledge it's going to be a bit of a work in progress as we try to implement the entire or facilitate these new policies. Some of the differences will be somebody coming in that wants to build a pool or does a significant improvement, an addition, or something beyond what's been spelled out in the code. They're going to go ahead and need to be able to bring us a document or a survey that kind of tells us that they meet the landscaping code. Or if they're deficient in certain areas, then we can work on a solution to meeting that goal. We're looking forward to it. Back in 2004 and 2005, and just recently with Hurricane Irma, and my rough calculations, I know that we hauled out almost over 200,000 cubic yards of landscaping debris out of the village. So yes, a lot of it has grown back, but we've also seen through attrition, some canopy that really could be replaced. So we're trying to reach canopy equity with our species analysis, and we look forward to the challenge. And if you have any questions, but we are counting on you and some of the mechanisms that we have in place to educate our public.
I'll be happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Okay, before we delve into questions, I just want to give to anyone here, we didn't collect comment cards because this is a workshop, but I would like to give anyone here, if they from the public would like to comment, now would be a good time to do that. Okay, seeing none, then I'm closing public comment for the workshop and opening it up to council. Who was first? Richard? You were first.
Sure. I guess it's probably a Rob question because you mentioned 2004, 2005. I personally had some trees that were blown out. Now, the way that it is now and the way that we're envisioning the changes If you've got a tree blown down on a storm like that, do we have to come and apply for a permit to remove that thing that's been removed by nature?
No,
Okay, I just, it wasn't clarified and it wasn't in there, but, you know, I've
we
got
can't-
that
We
situation.
wouldn't, yes, we wouldn't be able to stop that action. Now, if it was something, let me give you a different example. Storm is coming a day before, 2 days from now, and somebody in fear of their, safety goes out and cuts down a giant, huge tree and lays it in their front yard, and
That's just bad.
I think we know what we're talking about.
Right.
But the answer to that would be, we would review that afterwards. The storm damage or lightning damage or tree abuse, no matter how it happens, we would then want to initiate to see if we suspected that it fell below the minimum, we would start a process to rectify that.
There'd also be the opportunity to have us take a look at it, and the tree may be able to be saved. Just because it's knocked over doesn't mean that killed it. It may be able to be saved, and we'll have an arborist on board, and if there's opportunity to save it, we would encourage that in lieu of, especially if it's a specimen tree, replacing it at be a 40-inch tree, the 6-to-1 ratio.
Since you mentioned it, one of the notes I had was, do we have on staff currently a certified arborist?
We do in the Parks and Rec Department, but not at Village Hall. We put $20,000 in the budget for using a consultant this next year.
For each department.
For each department, for planning and zoning, and for community development. So we do have money in the budget to have an arborist take us this first year. And over time, we'll see how that goes. In a lot of the conversations with cities that take this tree preservation and tree ordinance very seriously, in many organizations, it does become a full-time position.
Okay.
I have a question to piggyback on that, because that was one of my questions, because I thought we did, but can residents utilize that arborist, or do they have to go out and
As it
contract with
relates to
an
the
outside?
code, that will be available, but and that'll be up to staff. I mean, we're not just going to have the arborist, somebody call and get access to the arborist. So people will be calling and asking about the code. Staff will try to handle that first. If staff feels an arborist needs to be brought in to assist, then we will.
So the presentation was very comprehensive, and more pictures is better, especially as I think you all recognize, graphics and that kind of stuff is really helpful to relieve the panic. That one, if you look at all of that language and the specificity of it, it's kind of like, oh my God. To be able to look at a picture and to see what's desired, what the outcome is supposed to be, or what is prohibited, very powerful. Now, getting that word out, I'm delighted that there's all of this attention to public education. But if we're waiting for people to come to us beyond the Vector and Pulse, I'm not sure that's going to work really, really well. Like, for example, waiting for a property manager from an HOA to give you a call and say, come on over and talk to us. I have a feeling what might happen is that the very first time that conversation takes place is when they find themselves in a difficult position. And then they're desperate, and they're probably not going to be real receptive to being educated.
Councilman, you bring up two very good points. One, we're already starting our cut sheet to try to simplify and to be able to take the facts out of this ordinance and be able to illustrate it in a simple way and not a condensed fashion that you just saw tonight, so we can communicate all those nuances within the code. And let me be perfectly clear, we are not taking the position of sitting back and waiting for someone to call us. We are fully engaged to reach out and contact those HOAs and those property managers, and we will do that during that 6-month period at several times for that same reason, because it's been my experience that sometimes people will lean back and would rather claim ignorance when they're in a compromised position with this landscaping, and we want to prevent that for everybody's sake.
You can
We
do a
will be
roadshow?
mailing and getting stuff to all of our HOAs. And in that documentation we provide them, we will tell them we'll make ourselves available on their schedule.
Okay, so have you all thought about, and maybe you can still talk about doing this possibly with the consultant, doing a really simplified version of the graphics and that kind of stuff to in a form of a handbook or something like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, a consult, luckily, bringing on, they're urban foresters, so they're planners, but they're also arborists, so they see big picture. That's what we're gonna be trying to get on board with us, but
Okay.
they are gonna have a wealth of information and probably a wealth of manuals that we don't have access to, where they can turn this stuff around quick. And our thought is to use that, and I think Rob had said this already, use them as our education source, because we want our arborists out there. We want them doing preventative measures. In this 6 months, they should be going out and they should be looking at properties and maybe make contact with the owner and say, hey, by the way, this ordinance is coming in 6 months. I see some deficiencies here. You guys may want to go ahead and start working on this. To address what Rob had said, claiming ignorance later, we don't want that to happen. We want everyone to be fully informed up front. And we think that the arborist is going to be very helpful in doing that.
And Councilman, when we had met years ago, I showed you that document that had some of our small, more common code violations. We use that as one of our best tools. We've been holding off on the reprinting of that until some of these major changes.
Right.
So we anticipate updating that as just one of our tools, and we'll be able to make that available for yourselves, ourselves, our residents, so they'll have a more updated sampling of that code.
Okay, that's great. Now that's a rollout kind of a thing over the 6-month period of time. Now comes a time when, as a homeowner, I'm looking at a situation, maybe it's a tree down and that kind of thing. Is it going to be pretty common knowledge as to who to go to on the village staff to get guidance and help in trying to figure out what I need to do so I don't get myself in trouble?
Well, the process starts right over here on the west wing. So if they can come in there,
West wing?
oh, that's this side of the building. I don't know, we call it that all the time. I'm sorry. That's the first time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right.
So
We used to have our own TV show.
the process is a little more, they're going to be able to come in that door, and we're going to make the forms and the process available to them right there at that counter. Now, some of the reviews that happen will be passed right up to planning and zoning, so there is going to be a process. But the initial contact will be right there at the front desk of community development, where they are used to coming in, and making that contact now.
Okay. And they'll be directed appropriately and
Certainly.
helped to understand what they need to do and that kind of thing.
Certainly, certainly.
That's
We
really,
understand how difficult this is going to be, and that's why I think the code clarifies a lot of things that generate that equity, and I think some of the more sticky points are going to be when some of the development triggers the minimum requirement on some of the homes that were built prior to November 15th, 2001. And we're going to handle those in as best way possible. But, our goal, and we've talked to the manager, we would like to at least see, the code met, but 1 or 2 good trees on every lot. So, and we really believe it'll protect property values.
I think it's heading in the right direction. One other question is having to do with the list of recommendations that the Planning and Zoning Commission came up with.
Mm-hmm.
I'm presuming that, correct me if I'm wrong, that the staff has addressed every one of these and either adopted, included, or
We-
had a reason to not.
Yes, let me, So planning and zoning, they actually met over a year ago on this ordinance. And we did take it back after that meeting, and we did talk about a lot of those recommendations at the staff level, and we did try to incorporate where we could. A few of these are policy direction that we didn't feel we could just insert into the ordinance without getting guidance from council. But real quick, there weren't that many recommendations. Revise the definition of tree abuse as it relates to pruning live palm fronds by providing specific examples and graphics for residents. Example, no carrot topping. We did add in a maintenance standard for palms, and then the examples and graphics, those will all be in the training materials and the public education materials that community development is going to be putting out. So yes, we did address that comment. Another one, the village should hire an arborist to act as a consultant to the Code Enforcement and Planning and Zoning Department to enforce the new tree preservations. Like Ray said, and you've heard tonight, that's already in the budget. $20,000 is allocated, $40,000 total 20 to community development, 20 to planning and zoning for our urban forester to do that very thing. Review the standards for horizontal clear zones in the right-of-way regulations to ensure that these standards provide sufficient clearance. I did review that with the village engineer. He is comfortable with the standards that we've put in the ordinance. Make a clear statement that the village does not require a permit fee to add landscaping to a site. We didn't add that because it only talks about permit fees if you're removing vegetation, and single family are exempted from the permit fees. We didn't feel it was necessary to state that you don't need a permit to add vegetation. So that one we didn't do. Add a provision that larger trees may be substituted for smaller minimum standard tree requirements. For example, if the tree replacement schedule requires 5 trees at minimum code requirements, they can replace 1 large tree instead, or 2 large trees. We felt comfortable with what we're proposing. This was one of those policy directions. This was a very different idea from what we had been discussing at a staff level. So the thought is, allow more flexibility from the residents to choose what size trees they want to put in and maybe get credit for larger trees. I think that's a little difficult to enforce from our end. That's going to be a lot more work going out and figuring out if somebody should get credit for a larger tree. And we have a minimum requirement, so we're used to enforcing the minimum requirement. The village should consider publishing notices in the town crier of upcoming public outreach events for the new landscaping ordinance. Additionally, the village should put information in the newsletter. The LPA believed that community outreach was key in order to have a successful ordinance. We have not talked about town crier, but we are doing other, like Vector, manager's newsletter, the hand-delivered newsletter, town crier. If council directs us to do that, we could absolutely do that. And then finally, the village should consider having an Arbor Day event at Commons Park. We don't have an Arbor Day event at Commons Park. We do an Arbor Day proclamation every year, and also we donate money to our public schools to do Arbor Day events at their schools. And that is enough to satisfy the Arbor Day Foundation. So obviously, if council wants to do more, we can always do more. But those were the recommendations. So yes, we did go through all of them. It did take a year to kind of flesh out some of this stuff, but I hope that answered your question.
It did. Thank you. That was excellent. Thanks.
I just have a couple quick questions. So going back to the part where it says donating the tree or money towards it, one thing that I get frustrated about is when developers can come in and they do the buyout. So is this another way of doing that, or can we alleviate so you just can't tear down everything and this is not meant for developers that want to clear cut. Okay.
It is meant more for the homeowner that maybe had the specimen tree on their property that grew to enormous size and then it died, and all of a sudden they're faced with having to plant 5 trees on a tiny lot, and there's no way they can fit 5 oak trees on that tiny lot. Like I said before, with the specimen trees on clear cutting, we've added in a lot more protection for the village, because you're right, before, developers can come in and they can bulldoze everything, and there is nothing we can do about it. Now, like I said, if there's specimen trees on a new development site, we can work with the developer to build buildings around those trees or congregate the trees in one area to make a nice park area or a preservation area or a buffer area. We're giving ourselves a lot more flexibility, so there's not just a true clear cutting anymore.
And that's just with the specimen trees, though, as far as developing is concerned.
Well, also, we did, for non-specimens, we did add in criteria allowing planning and zoning department to condition just regular clear cutting.
Okay.
So even if it's not specimens, like I talked about.
So they can't just do that and pay out. Okay.
Yeah.
The other one was when we talked about the 6-month grace period, as you're going through this education process, do they still have to abide by what is going forward? So my fear is I don't want somebody to go like, oh, wait, here's the new rules. Let me do everything now before it goes into effect. Is there?
Could happen.
Okay, that's a concern I have. The other one is when you talk about outreach and everything, Park and Rec does a great job because everyone has to register and leave their email address with them when we do events through the village, whether they register for anything. So maybe using that database, I don't know whether you can, just to say here's an e-blast as far as information too, but it's a great way of sending out information that we already captured.
The only way to minimize the concern of doing that beforehand is not make it 6 months implementation, make it something less.
I mean, I understand the grace period that
them
you
less
need for the
opportunity.
education, but that's my fear is that you still have to, this is what's going into effect. You can kind of go by the guidelines so that it's, oh, okay, let me cut down this tree right now because if I don't do it, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to be able to in
So-
6 months, so.
To minimize that concern, it would be 3 months instead of 6 months. I mean, that would be a council decision if that was,
No, I think what might be a good thought on that is not reduce the timeline for implementation, but start immediately doing, what do you call it when you give, the warning citations?
Courtesy notices?
Courtesy notice, where during the implementation phase, it's like with the traffic lights, the first, in the beginning, you just get a warning, and then there's a day when now you get the real ticket. I think that's part of the education process. Part of the education process is, hey, yellow flag, you've got a problem here. But the good news is, we won't cite you now, but we'll help you understand how you can become compliant. And your timeline for that now, you got, if it's 6 months, I was thinking we might even want to make it longer than that, because I think one of the things, the thought that kept running through my head through your whole presentation is, how do we enforce this? All right, how do we, in a rational way, actually enforce many of the things? Because there's a lot that's going to be going on here that is going to require the ability to actually enforce it.
Well, we're hoping that the urban forester is really going to assist with that, especially with the commercial properties, and it is going to be a learning experience for a lot of people to start.
Exactly.
And none of us have talked about immediately citing someone and taking them to a hearing like 2 weeks. We're not going to be doing that. It's an education process, and it's going to continue. And it may take some time on the commercial properties. It may take time before they get to hearing.
Maybe there is a incentive not to do that on your property, because right now the current code is in place. So if you cut down a tree, you will get the attention of code enforcement, you will get the attention of the planning and zoning department. Well, there's a good chance if you cut one down from your property now and we go to that site, it doesn't have the 5 or 6 trees that our current code requires. So that would be the code we'd have to enforce now. So it might be a better idea to wait until the 6 months and the standard is considerably reduced on the residential property, how many is required.
Yep.
If someone goes out and does a violation now and takes a tree out, it will get our attention and we will inspect the site for compliance to the existing code. So that may require that they put 5 trees now, even though the future code wouldn't require it.
I thought we said I think you said December would go into effect?
That's right.
So from starting then, when the new rules are in effect, we start the review process then and citing, but not citing for actual, giving
Well,
them
it's
the warning
only-
notice, kind of.
The only thing that's the grace period is the maintenance, tree pruning, tree trimming, tree abuse. If there's trees just not there, code can cite them in December for that, for not having the minimum.
Based on the new rules.
Correct, right.
And we should.
Based on the existing-
Is that
Based on our
what- is that what you
based on
had in
our
mind?
existing
Existing
rules.
rules.
The
too.
existing is going to go away in December.
And just to Mr. Mayor,
I'm confused. The existing rules go away December 6th.
Correct.
So the new rules are in effect, so you can't cite them on the old rules. You cite
But
them
it's
on the
just
new
the
rules.
trimming and pruning. So
Well, I'm confused. The whole ordinance doesn't go into effect
no,
December 6th?
all of it goes into effect. We're just not enforcing the pruning
I
and trimming.
understand.
Right.
Yeah, but I think what I'm suggesting is as part of the education process, is actually giving them warning notice, citing, saying, you still got time to, this is not an official notice, but this is an example of something that's non-compliant. As opposed to, I'm saying that should be part of our education outreach. Part of the outreach should be, yellow flag here during that 6-month period, is what I'm suggesting. And there's no real sanctions that take effect until that 6 months or whatever that timeline is.
Okay, well, we'll have to talk about that
Our goal
internally.
should be, and how can I say this? Our goal should be to create a transition strategy that is harmless in effect, but truly educates. It doesn't create harm. And it should be as long as it needs to be. I know you're suggesting 6 months, but if it needs to be longer, it should be longer, because the goal is to get compliance in a voluntary way, not in a in a negative way. And the negative way is we start citing people all over the place.
Well, and I think along the same, what you're saying, those, because in June, then when it goes into effect, that's the beginning of hurricane season, when
Well, I
people
was gonna
start
say,
doing all that
I
major
know,
stuff
I know,
anyway.
yeah, when he
Yeah.
said 6 months June, I said, that's right, hurricane season, here we go,
Right.
yeah, yeah. So I think that we need to really be very, very aggressive in our multiple prong approach to educating the public, to really, get voluntary, part of the education should be voluntary compliance, Hey, come look at my trees, please, almost. I don't know if that'll happen, but the concept should be, we're not trying to hurt anybody. This is really for the greater good of the community and of the village, and it's for the greater good of things like impacting property values. So let's do this hopefully in a voluntary way of getting not only education, but people, citizens wanting to be compliant, in working with them in that way. That we're not trying to go out, we're not trying to find things that we want to find people on, and we're not trying to get money, that's kind of a negative way, and I don't want it to be perceived that way. So.
Mayor, we hear you, and we're certainly going to utilize every personal contact we make out there, whether it's courtesy notice or a chance to speak to somebody that's involved with trimming or cutting their trees, to let them know what's coming or may already be established. I'm sorry, I don't. Yeah. Jan, all right, but this one, I'll give you one second. The commercial properties. I know we've had problems with commercial properties. Do we have a different thought process on how to get compliance from the commercial properties vis-a-vis the residential?
Find them.
Fine them. Fine them.
Well,
I will
you have the
say-
ability to fine up to $5,000 per
Yeah.
tree.
I will tell you, I'm the magistrate for the city of West Palm Beach. And as a magistrate, the requests that they make of me when they have a hat racking situation in one of their commercial districts, I have to take a breath. They are serious. They do not joke. It is up to $15,000 per tree, and they ask for that.
This is for commercial properties?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So, they're a large city, they can go above the 5,000. But that is the way you get the attention of commercial owners.
Now, this grace period, does that apply to commercial properties too?
For the trimming, yes, it
All
will.
right, so the commercial properties can be given notice. You need to get your trees in order or
And
something.
if I could just back up for 1 second. Right now, the current code says if you hat rack it, you have to remove it and replace it. Okay? We're giving them the ability to seek out a professional. If it appears to us that there's a violation, they can bring on a professional to analyze it and put it on some kind of a plan to get it back in a healthy fashion.
This complaint you got from commercial properties saying that they wanted to clear out the canopies because it blocked their signage, what's the reality around that?
Well, Bradford always explains it really well, that, and I'll try to do this well.
Oh, you got the Bradford company.
He always talks about how your monument sign is supposed to guide people from the roadway into your shopping plaza.
Okay.
And then your wall signage is when you're actually
Once you
in the
get in.
plaza. But they want to cut the trees so that you can see their wall signs from the road. But
Actually,
that's
that's
not
a
the point of
safety
wall
hazard.
signs.
Because people looking in there
Did I say
instead of
that
looking
right?
on the road.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Okay. I wanted to make sure we had that comment on the record, actually, but, because it has come up over and over. Hey, Jan.
I have a ton of questions. Well, not a ton, a few. Really thorough job. Great job, everybody, for all the time you put into this document. I'm curious about the grandfathering in. So I move into the village in 2010, but yet my home was built in 1985. Why is a new homeowner grandfathered in and not up to, if the former homeowner who built the home before 2001 leaves, why is that new owner grandfathered in?
Landscaping is one of those issues that runs with the land, so it's one of those things that can be grandfathered. So if the house was built before a certain standard was imposed, that old standard carries forward. Now, there are exceptions to that. You know, a house may be grandfathered, but if they just take out all of their trees, and they were supposed to have 2 even under the old code, they lose that grandfathering status. But that is why, because landscaping is one of those things that can run with the land as a development standard. And it doesn't matter that, you know, home ownership may change over the years.
And if I could add to that, the grandfathering would just mean that no action would be taking place. Jennifer had mentioned removal of some trees. That would trigger or lose the grandfathering. Coming in and doing any kind of a significant improvement, a pool, a driveway larger than 250 square feet, a shed larger than that, would also lose the grandfathering, and then the code would apply.
So if I remove enough trees that I don't meet the minimum, do I then replace based on the old? Or do I lose grandfather now and have to go to the new?
We would have to look at the specific situation. If you lost all trees on your property, there's a good argument that you lost your grandfathering status. If
Right.
maybe you just dropped one below, we would probably let you just put one back in and not. You always want to have a sense of reasonableness when you're dealing with these things, but it is so fact specific. But like Rob said, the more likely scenario is that you've had some addition to your house, and that's what's going to trigger you losing your grandfathering status.
Okay.
And remember, this code exists. We're adding the species element, you know, to establish canopy equity. But, and in homes that are built prior to that deadline or that line, November 15, 2001, that may be that example, we're using the net area calculation. So it's not a higher standard. It's just a way to establish some kind of a minimum standard with trees and areas that we've lost canopy through attrition and other activities.
I think the net area calculation is super, very, very intelligent.
I think that makes it a fair proposal.
Another question about the tree replacement schedule. So let's say I have 4 trees in my yard and they're in the 17 to 24 inch diameter size, and I take out 2 of them. I now have to replace them with 6 trees. Is that right?
But maybe not with net lot area anymore. Maybe different. You may not be able to fit.
Right.
So
Can I just walk you through that scenario?
Sure.
Okay, so you would cut those trees down. And we would come out and we would say, you know, these are 2 species trees. You do. I don't have the table right in front of me. 6 trees. I don't have room for 6 trees. Okay, well, first of all, you need to provide us some kind of a quantified survey of your lot. Something that describes how many trees you have on your lot, as well as a survey so we can calculate how much impervious area to the pervious area that you have left. Then we would take that pervious area and apply it to that calculation. Okay, so even at that point, you say, well, now I still have my 6 trees that are species trees. I only have room for 2. You would represent that to us. It would be reviewed by planning and zoning, and they would verify, you know what, you're right. This is a tree. We want to have a tree that's similar to that. It may be a live oak that requires a 25-foot canopy. Those other 5 trees, you have the option of then possibly donating trees to the village or utilizing the tree bank option.
That's great. Thank you for walking us through that. So speaking of the tree bank, I have all the trees I need, but I love trees so much. Can I donate one to the village?
yes, you would be able to. We would set that up.
Can I have my name on the tree?
You're going to have to talk about Lou about the
Wouldn't that be a beautiful-
sponsorship.
Can't carve it in there.
No, maybe not on the tree.
Flag.
You can't have a big name going around.
Right. We wanted to set up the tree bank not only to help people with this landscaping code, but for that idea as well. You know, you get requests over time about, I want to donate some trees to the village. I love Commons Park. I want to donate a tree. Maybe in the spot I love to picnic. You know, we don't really have a way to facilitate that right now. So we thought a tree bank would be a great way to do that.
So is that yes to the name?
Lou has a sponsorship policy.
There's
You
a-
can
yeah.
talk to
Maybe you can
him.
buy a brick underneath the tree.
Right.
Okay.
So we have the list of specimen trees, but there's still another list of native trees that are acceptable.
Yes.
And those will be on the education brochures, infographic,
I
whatever
was
for the.
just talking to Linda Walker, our code supervisor, about that before the meeting, and she said that, what would be great as part of this education effort is to have what we think are great native shade trees, give a list, have a list available. FPL you hear talk about all the time, right tree, right place. If you're having to put a tree under a power line, have that list easily accessible. So yes, we're definitely talking about doing that.
And then, I think the last one is, with all the PR and need to get out really good education and celebrating Arbor Day, is there a way to combine those with a kickoff? Assuming Arbor Day on one of these letters was February. I don't know if that's still the same time period. But if it goes into effect in December, you've got December to January to create the materials, and then in February we do Arbor Day, and then there's a big kickoff with the brochures and flyers and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Sounds good. Good idea.
And is there a way to maybe give some free trees away, or get a donation for some free trees?
Well, part of Arbor Day events is you have the little saplings. That's like one of the standard traditional things that you do give away at those events, and people can go and plant those in their yards. So, if you were to do a traditional Arbor Day celebration, that's usually incorporated into it. So if council directed, I guess Lou would be handling that. and then we could,
Having to,
okay.
Paul's not here tonight, it'll be Paul.
It would be Paul. Oh, okay.
That would be Paul,
Well, he's not here tonight, so.
because he's not here.
I'll make a
I'm
recommendation.
writing Paul.
Make this on.
I'll second.
Well, I don't know who it would be, but there, we do have it, and it is in the ordinance on the streetscape program. As the tree bank or a tree farm, or however we end up doing that, or both, become available, it is our intention to do streetscapes, and the streetscape that we're imagining, because there really isn't room between curbs and sidewalks.
Right.
With the guidelines and the facilities underground to fit trees. So we have a distance behind the sidewalk that trees can go, and we have 25-foot setbacks on the house, so I think we came up with 10 feet from the sidewalk. And I mean, ideally, in many of these streets, if we can get one tree in every yard, somewhere in that front yard, 10 feet from the sidewalk, that's the ultimate goal in all of this, is to end up with that. Even in the standard we came up with the 1 to 2,000, we know there's not going to be much room or many trees being planted in backyards with pools and patios. There's just not much, and people prefer not to have that over their pools. So we think that they're going to, once we get into this and we're serious about having trees on these lots and having a tree canopy, we think we're going to end up with a tree in the front of every yard, and that's going to, and we will have the ability of giving those to the people.
Nice. One last question about the education materials. In Spanish, can we do it in Spanish as well for the folks that are driving around trying to find business to trim trees?
That's an interesting.
Okay.
We can definitely work to have those translated. We have other materials translated, so we can work with our contacts to do that. Yeah.
Be great.
Good thought. So, any other comments? Huh? No.
Swear jar money.
Okay. Where's the jar?
It's called the tree fund.
Oh, the tree bank.
Oh, the tree. Oh, okay.
All right.
Any other questions, comments from members of the
Thank you.
council?
Great job.
A lot of information. I know this has been a topic that we've been looking at for quite a few years. Now, are we really in jeopardy of losing our tree city designation?
Somebody had asked me that question a while ago, and my thought was no. But then I found a story. I put it in the presentation. Atlantic Beach, which is up near Jacksonville, actually had theirs revoked because they weren't following the criteria. So there is a possibility that
Do they show up? Does somebody show up every year and
Oh, we do a report, we submit
Yeah,
it,
consider it-
and there is some minimum standards. Another minimum standard is how much you spend on buying new trees and how much you invest in maintaining your trees. So we provide them those numbers. We've been doing capital projects every year, so we've always met that number, but if you get to a point where you're not doing capital projects and
Okay.
if you didn't have something else going on, then it could,
We don't-
you could get close.
We don't want to lose that designation, that's for sure. So. Well, if there's no further questions, anything else you want to share with us?
This will be on council agenda for first reading at your next meeting.
That's soon.
Yeah.
Are we ready for this? Do you, or do any of you, do you feel like you want to sleep on this a little longer, or you're ready to have it come before us?
Seems okay to me.
I'm okay with it. I think there's plenty of
Yeah.
Okay.
reasonable justification.
The staff feel like they've gotten enough feedback, information from us to answer any questions that you had coming into the meeting, to the discussion?
Yes, Mayor, we do.
And like I said,
Good points Councilwoman Radusky brought up, and
Okay.
so we will be asking for direction on the specimen trees.
Yeah,
And I guess based on conversation
That
tonight
should be
too,
interesting,
the 6-month timeframe.
Direction on the specimen trees, because.
the arborist point of view, what they think too.
Okay, well, with that then, I'll close the workshop, and we have no further business before the council this evening, so we stand adjourned. Thank you all.